It was an interesting time to be down at Intergroup during when COVID hit, and to be down here for that in Austria. I felt like we were a good team together with Lara and all the rest. But it was interesting, and forever I'll be grateful for that because I had a lot of friends that were like, there's no more service commitments, right? Like when the meeting shut down, and I felt like I was so lucky to have all this opportunity to be of service. I was grateful. So I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic.
Mike.
And I'm going to start my
You're already
timer.
30 seconds in, Mike.
Okay, so you'll tell me. I can look down. Thank you. I never have to worry about Lara and Austria, stepping in to tell me what to do. They'll always- So
Got you.
I grew up in this area. I grew up in the Puget Sound, and pretty much I've lived here the entire time. I grew up, I had a very loving family. My parents are still married. They're still alive. They live in Renton. I have a younger sister. I'm a little bit resentful at neither of my parents are alcoholics, but they had the unfortunate situation where both their kids are alcoholics. The only good thing is both their kids are sober. But my little sister, who's 7 years younger, has more time than me. So she got here before I did. I didn't drink. I was kind of a goody two-shoe kid. I never even thought about drinking. And, my only experience with drugs, I smoked marijuana a couple times, but my personal belief, it's the same thing. But I just didn't do drugs because they scared me too much. Like I thought I was going to die, or I grew up in the era of, Nancy Reagan and, Miami Vice. And so it was too, I mean, the people who know me, I'm just, that stuff made me too nervous, but I never thought alcohol was a drug because you just, you had it in stores but I didn't have my first drink until I was 18. And the only thing that did happen that was significant, so when I was 16, I was cycling, I wanted to be the next Greg LeMond when I was a kid, and I was cycling and I got hit by a motorcycle, and I spent 4 months at Harborview, and it was pretty severe. I couldn't walk, my back was broke and all this, but as a 16-year-old kid laying in the bed when you can't move, I couldn't eat. I had tube feeding, all this stuff. It felt very alone and afraid. And when they gave me the Demerol, I did not feel alone and afraid. And I felt fine. The world was okay. Everything was going to be okay. So, I guess I learned that then, but I still, I didn't drink. And that was when I was 16 and I waited another 2 years. But I had my first drink in my senior year, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit what my first drink was, but it was the 80s, okay? And so Bruce Willis used to be the spokesperson for Seagram's Coolers, and my first drink was a Seagram's Golden Wine Cooler on a beach in San Diego with my cousin. I had 2 of those, and I felt great, and I didn't realize it at the time growing up because, I had friends and, I was class president, but for whatever reason, even though I was surrounded by people, a loving family, at the time I didn't realize it, but looking back, I felt apart from. And I don't know why that was. I don't think I'm unique. I mean, I think a lot of alcoholics have this feeling of apart from. And when I drank, I did not feel apart from. And, so I did not first of all, I didn't drink for too long. I drank for 10 years. I ended up in AA at the age of 20. So I went downhill pretty quickly. I started to get into trouble. My first meeting ever in AA was the Fremont Fellowship Hall. I love the Fremont Fellowship Hall, but I don't necessarily recommend it for a young 20-year-old kid that's a little nervous. It intimidated me walking into there, but I also wasn't ready. I was here on a deferred prosecution, and I did my 2 years. I didn't stop drinking, by the way. I went to meetings and I got my court slip signed, but I drank, and I never got in trouble. I just learned I couldn't drink and drive. So I just stayed at home and drank or didn't drive. And so the interesting thing looking back on it is I actually had forgot that I had gone, when I got here this time, I forgot I had gone to AA before. And to give you some idea, like I have no real recollection. I know I went to Fremont, Edlin Fellowship Hall, Living in Sobriety. I remember kind of the locations, but like I definitely don't remember. It was almost like I sat down and I just turned off everything. Like I did not even know there were 12 steps until I got here this time. Like I just didn't think I wasn't ready. And so, I got through that and I continued drinking and, kind of like Mark or, I would say the first 5 years of my drinking, my first 6 years of my drinking were not too bad. Every time I had problems, drinking was involved. That was it. I didn't tend to have problems if I wasn't drinking, but every time I had a problem, I was drunk. But the frequency between the drinks started to quickly get less and less. Like when it used to be go out and party on a Friday, Saturday with friends, I became, the last 3-4 years of my drinking, I was a daily drunk. I remember I had to turn on back then. I had the TV. This was a long time ago. So I should have said my last drink was December 1st, 1998. And so I'd have to turn on the TV to know what day and time it was, because they used to have a channel menu back then. And, I would have just been passed out for days on end. And so, the last 3-4 years of my drinking, it was like Groundhog Day. I mean, it was the same thing over and over. I would try to limit it to 12 drinks when I had to work the next day. Sometimes I'd be successful, sometimes I wasn't. And then on the weekend, it was a complete blackout. Like I would come home Friday. And in fact, how I got here this time was, and by the way, what amazes me is nowhere during that misery, it was misery, like you guys understand, and nowhere during that time of 3-4 years did I ever think about coming to AA. And it's not like I thought, oh, that's not for me. It just never even registered. The thought never came to my mind about Alcoholics Anonymous. But for whatever reason, I went to my employer one day, and I just went to my boss and I said, and that day was no different than, like nothing bad had happened, nothing significant. I went to my boss and I worked at a health insurance company. And I said, I can't remember if I don't think I said I was an alcoholic. I think I said, I think I have a problem with alcohol. And she was kind of like, thank God. She's like, I thought I was fooling, alcoholics think you're fooling like everyone. And I wasn't fooling anyone, And so she said, she took me down to the employee assistance program, and they took me, they took me immediately that day to detox, at Swedish. They used to have a detox program there. And it was me and like 30 pregnant women, because they specialized in pregnant women. And so it's like one of the few males, and I wasn't pregnant. But I went there, and that was about 97. And I went through detox, and then I went through outpatient. And that is where I got through that outpatient. They'd have like these educational things, like a lot of them were like showing you stuff about what it does to the liver and all this other crap. But like one of them was 2 men from AA came in and did just like we're doing here. They just got up and they shared their experience, strength, and hope. And one of those men, Paul, I could really identify with, and I went up to him after the meeting. But what I could identify with is like a Mark shared, is like, that's the first time I'd heard another person that drank like I did. Like he did the same things. And that identification was like, I went up to him, he had 10 years sober at the time. And I said, how did you do that? And he said, well, why don't you go to a meeting with me the next morning? And so I did. And that's really where AA started, but I didn't get sober. I could not stay sober. So That was in September 97. So from September 97 to December 98, about a year or whatever, I was detoxed, I think 6 times. Like I would drink about, I met Steve early on in sobriety. I remember sitting in, it was, I believe it was Abigail's Ghost down at the water canal there, the old Red Robin. And I was talking to Steve and, I drank again and was demoralized and I just didn't know what, and they put me in relapse prevention. And I remember Steve, like you probably don't remember this, but I remember Steve going, "You know why you drank again? Because you're an alcoholic. Like, stop trying to figure it out and just do these things, like there's no, like trying to figure out why. I mean, for me, this is me only trying to figure out why I drank wasn't as important as taking the next indicated action. But, I think for me, so, I would go back to Swedish. It was kind of like rinse and repeat. I joked that they used to have a whiteboard with the names of the patients in the rooms. And like, I would come back in and they'd be, "Hi, Mike, how are you doing?" I mean, I'd been there 60 days before, 45 days before. They knew my name. I joked that they never took my name off the whiteboard. But the last time I got out, and I had a sponsor, I was doing, I got that, Paul, that man I met, became my sponsor. I had a sponsor. We were meeting and going through the book. I had a service commitment. I was making coffee at the morning meeting. I was going to a meeting every day, but I couldn't stay sober. And so the last time I got out, I always kind of thought he was going to let me go. He's like, "Okay, you're not serious. I've had enough of you." And I had that fear. And the last time I got out, he said, "I've talked to my sponsor, and the only thing we can think of to do is we're going to go through the steps as fast as we can." He said, "Because somewhere between 5 and 9, the obsession to drink left me." And what we had been doing is every time I drank, we started meeting every week and we'd start at the beginning of the big book. But every time I drank, we would start back at the beginning. So I never got, at 45 days, I think I might have gotten into the doctor's opinion or I never got very far. I never did any steps. So he said, "That's what we're going to do." And that's what we did. And I gave him my 5th step at, I had less than 90 days for sure. And I haven't drank since then. And I had 23 years in December. For me, I believe, like it says in the steps for me, like I must have had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And I wasn't aware of it at the time. Like I gave him my 5th step, sat down with him. It was like the way he did it, it was 9 hours. It was not, and I was just like exhausted after it. But like I didn't feel any better. I didn't feel any worse. I didn't feel, I was grateful I did it, but I was like, okay. But the thing I did notice is the next AA meeting I went to and I sat in, I felt a part of. Like I'd always kind of felt like you were all welcoming and you always said my name and, shake my hand and give me a hug. But like the next AA meeting I went to, I just felt somehow I'm a member, like I'm a part of this. And, I'm grateful for that. And, since I want to read one thing, which this is probably my favorite part in the book. This is from Bill's story. He says, "My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead," he said, "and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again, and if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that." And so I remember, Paul, I don't think he did this too. I think there was some of it. He did it for my ego a little bit. So he would take me to a mall, and we had to sit in the middle of the mall and read the book together. like in public. And I think it was for convenience for him too at the time. But like, I was like, I'm not going to go read the big book in public with this other man. Like, that's embarrassing. But you know, those were the thoughts I had. I had a lot of thoughts like that, getting sober and working with him. Luckily, I didn't say anything. I mean, they just kind of rattled around in my head, and you know, he would have me do things, and I'm like, you know, he had me go to used bookstores until I found a dictionary that was written in about the same year the big book was written. And he said that way when we got to words we didn't know, or I didn't know, I could look them up, and you know, what they mean changes. And I asked him later why he did it, and he's like, I think he'd forgotten. He's like, I think I just wanted to keep you busy. Like he knew, like, spending too much time with myself, you know, was not good. And like by the time I got here, I was like, I had no woman wanted to be around me. I had lost. I wasn't married. I lost my friends. You know, had kind of just gotten tired of my bullshit. I lost that job because I drank again. So I was unemployed. I was living with my parents. But you know what that part. So we would go through and read the book, and we would take turns reading, and I would read, and I remember his voice. And he's still alive. I get to see him this weekend. But Paul would say, Mike, slow down. He's like, read it slowly. Let's take it. Because I think I would read this like a Tom Clancy novel. I would just be like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, just slow down. And he was big on, like, we'd read this. I remember reading this section, and he was big on pointing out certain words, and he thought they were written for a reason. And in this section in particular, you know, he pointed out, like, it doesn't say that I may have or I might have certain trials and low spots. Like, I'm going to have them in life, and I'm not going to survive unless I, you know, improve and perfect and enlarge my spiritual condition. And, you know, at the time I did it, and I was happy to be working with him, but a lot of this stuff has come to have more meaning later in my sobriety. And it's mainly because, you know, you stay in these rooms long enough. What used to be just words on a page in this book, I have seen happen over and over again in these rooms. Like, at my home group, I was good friends, and I still see him with a guy. He had 28 years, and he went back out. A guy had 38 years and went back out. And they all say this. The story never changes. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped, you know, I didn't have a sponsor. I let my sponsees go. And, you know, so you know, what used to be like, kind of like, okay, well, maybe that is it. Like, you see in this, the truth of what's written in here, I do at least. And, you know, I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think I was a product of good sponsorship and good fellowship. Like, people in AA, I remember at Abigail's, like, Paul's like, you're going to go to the Christmas, they used to have a Christmas party. And I'm like, I don't know. I was like 30 days sober. I'm like, I don't know anyone, and he wasn't going to take me either, but he wasn't going to be there. But it's like, you're going to go. And like, for him, you know, these were not suggestions. Like, you know, like I remember, you know, I asked him about like the steps or suggestions, and he said, yeah, it's like, his analogy was, it's like it's suggested you wear a parachute when you jump out of an airplane. You don't have to do it, but it's probably suggested. And you know, him, you know, he led by example, and I do think a lot of what I've learned in the program came from that first year of being sober. And so, like, I went to that Christmas party, and I felt like walking into that Christmas party felt like my freshman year walking into the dance at the high school. I felt scared and alone. I didn't know anyone. Like in high school, I'm sitting on the side of the gym. I go into this house, I'm sitting, I don't know any of you guys. And you all came up and welcomed me and said, hi, you know, if you didn't know me, who are you? And, you know, so I love Alcoholics Anonymous. When I went to Swedish, I had to go through an alcohol evaluation, and they ask you these questions. And, you know, the guy told me, he said, well, if you keep drinking the way you're drinking, and I had some other health issues, he said, you'll probably live to be 33. And I don't know if he was right or wrong, but like, if he's right for a second, like, then there's no doubt in my mind, AA, the steps, having a higher power and the fellowship has saved my life. And so, like, I liken Dr. Bob, how he puts it, he goes through the 4 reasons why he's very involved. And I do believe I have an obligation. I have a debt to repay. Like, I don't think I'll ever be done. How can I repay people that saved my life, literally? And so I still continue to try to be very active, like I usually go to 3, I try to go to 4 meetings a week. Sometimes it's 3. I still meet with a sponsor once a week. We're going through the steps. I meet with sponsees. I have a service commitment, a couple of them, and I've just never drifted. One thing I've never struggled. Couple things I've never struggled. Like, once I got here and got sober, I've never struggled with the idea that maybe I'm not an alcoholic. That's just never been, I've struggled with a lot of things, but not that. And I've never drifted away from the program, and that's not true. There was one point I had moved to San Francisco temporarily, and for 3 years, and I was at that point I was at a new job, and I was going to 1 meeting a week. And that 1 meeting a week was a burden. I remember going to that Sunday nights going, God, why do I have to do this? And so it's been my experience, like, it's kind of weird. The more I do in AA, the less of a burden it is. And actually the more time I seem to have, the more I do. And I think that's because, I'm also, like, what I've found for me is I like to say, where it says some are sicker than others. I think that's me, because I do not do well without Alcoholics Anonymous. And what I find is probably with about 3 days of not going to a meeting, 3-4 days, I start to get restless, irritable, and discontent. Like, life is unfair. People don't do things I want them to do. I know better than everyone. Why don't I get what it's I, like, I don't think that's ever going to go away. And so the good news is, what I've found, as long as I stay in here, I stay active, that kind of, like, there's a part in the book where it says, what I have is a daily reprieve based upon the maintenance of my daily reprieve from my drinking based upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And when I read this with Paul, his belief was, every place that they say drinking, you could substitute the word thinking, and it would be true. And so, I found that what I have is a daily reprieve from my thinking based upon the maintenance of my spiritual condition. And that's, I just like who I am as a person. I like the peace of mind I have and the gratitude I have when I'm an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I've had the opportunity in AA. I used to work at a job where I had to travel a lot internationally for work. And I've had the opportunity I think I've been to meetings in 30 different countries. And I love going to meetings when I used to have to travel. I love it. Like, I'm kind of an AA nerd. Like, I love that kind of stuff. And like, I've brought in big book. I've got, like, they don't have the same big book as we have in Australia. I mean, it's the same words, but it's a different cover, different stories in the back, but it's the same through Dr. Bob's. But I love that I have a book that's, like, I don't know why. They have a different big book in England, in South America. Again, it's the same program. They have just a different printing. And so I have big books from all around. And, the last time I traveled, I sat in meetings in Peru and Bolivia right before COVID. And my Spanish is not that good. And these were Spanish speaking meetings. And I would sit there practicing my 2 sentences that I was going to say. And I would practice it over and over before I went so I could say it in Spanish. And, and I felt just as welcome. Like, they came up to me. We would have, coffee after the meeting or whatever. And they appreciated that I tried to speak in Spanish. And they would kind of laugh a little bit. But, I've never, in all those 30 countries, I have yet failed. Every single one, it was the same problem, the same solution. you sit. I'm in Bolivia, and I'm in this. I didn't realize. I sat down in the meeting, and it was their business meeting, and they switched they don't have a regular meeting. They just do their business meeting on the nights of the business meeting. And so I didn't really, I don't know Spanish. So it took me a while of listening to their Spanish, and I could pick up enough. And I'm like, oh, and I'm going to leave. Why am I going to sit in this business meeting? And then the thought comes to me like, would you rather sit around a table with a bunch of alcoholics or go back and sit by myself in my hotel room? Because usually when I have to travel, I'm by myself. So I'm like, and so I stayed, and it was so funny that they talked about people weren't feeling their service commitments. They talked about they needed to get more money and people need to put more. It's the same stuff as we. Like AA, what I love is like, Starbucks or McDonald's, it's the same everywhere you go. And they have these marketing departments that make it the same. Like Alcoholics Anonymous, there's none of that. And it's the same meeting, no matter what country I've been in. So, I've been grateful for that. I've been grateful. I've been of service. I'm so grateful. I love Greater Seattle Intergroup. Like I said, like how do you put a price on the fact that like last month there were 35 12-step calls that came down here and people answered the phones and put one alcoholic in touch with another alcoholic like that, and, that kind of stuff. Like I hear it and I get to be a part of it, and I stop for a moment thinking about myself. And I would like to say that I love doing service, but I do, but I will tell you that the vast majority of the time when I'm asked to do something, when I'm going to go to a board meeting, I can't tell you how many times when we were talking about the PPP loan, I'm like, I do not want to go down to Seattle Intergroup or go to the Zoom meeting and try to manage this. These are the thoughts that go through my head, but you all have trained me. And so I don't most of the time when I have to, like I said, when I have to be of service, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm too busy. I don't need to do this. But just kind of like I had those same thoughts at the beginning. I now I feel like I have dogs too. And I feel like you guys have trained me and I mean this in a good way, like dogs. I don't listen to the first thought and I just come down here and do it. Or I go do whatever. I shouldn't say have to. I registered to go to a men's retreat this weekend. And I was telling my wife, I hope that thing gets canceled for COVID. I've been to that retreat 17 years, and I have the same thought every year. And so it's interesting for me. It's like I always feel like I've never left a meeting and didn't feel better. I feel just, if nothing else, I got an hour of peace. But it's just funny. And so I don't know. My point of all that is, I really, most of the time, my default is not to want, I'm too busy to go to meetings. I'm too busy to be of service. I have a sponsee, 2 sponsees. That's it. I'm not going to raise my hand. That's enough. And I just don't listen to that stuff. And I think that's, it's having good sponsorship at the beginning, but it's also you guys. I learned through seeing what you did, like John O'Hara. I've seen you since I've been here, There's a lot of you in this room, and I see, I see men and women. You give me hope and inspiration. When I see people go through difficult things, I think, okay, I can go through something that difficult. And the other thing I love is I've had to go through things that are difficult, and I paused it for 1 minute. And what my sponsor said is, if I don't have experience on it, he just refers me to another member who's had experience. And that's what I love. And so I keep coming back, and I finished in less than 30 minutes. So thanks for asking me. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.